Welcome, Congressman Guy Reschenthaler. I am so excited to talk to you because so much has gone on, and it's been a while since you and I chatted. And I have to say, I really appreciate how well you have represented the 14th District. We are so fortunate to have you.
Thanks, Rose. I appreciate it. It's good to be on with you.
Thanks. One of the first things I wanted to ask you about was the Paycheck Protection Plan. How well do you think that's gone? And some people are talking about a fourth stimulus. Not sure that's something we need right now. And is it something that you'll consider down the road? So if you could answer those couple of questions, I know a lot of people are really interested in that.
Well, let's take each in turn. So the Paycheck Protection Program has been incredibly successful. And I think you see that it's been very successful because it ran out of money, literally ran out of money with less than 2 weeks into the program. And I'll talk about the fiasco of getting more money in the PPP. And then in the second round, Rose, when we added, I think, $310 billion, there's originally $250 billion. We added $310 billion. In that next round, that money's going incredibly well. And the Treasury Department estimates that the PPP program has saved over 30 million jobs. So incredibly successful. So has the EIDL loans and grants program. That's where businesses can get up to $10,000 in advance, and that's forgiven as long as they use that money for certain purposes. So very successful. Now, as for a phase four, we got to remember we've already had 3.5 phases. We call the last phase 3.5 because it basically augmented 3.0 when we ran out of money for certain programs. I think we got to take a wait and see approach. I think that we need to see how this money is being spent, how it's not. Because remember, with phase three, we had $100 billion, that's billion with a B, for hospitals. Only 30 billion was distributed by the the Treasury Secretary, only 30 billion. So we still had 70 billion, yet we added more money to that in 3.5. Now, a lot of that money is going to testing, and you could say it was needed. I get it. But we need to see how the money is being spent 3.0 and 3.5 before we come with a phase four.
I think a lot of us in your district would agree with that. I think that's very wise to just pause for a moment, see how well it's worked, see what's needed in the future. And what I love about the PPP is that it put, as you said, a lot of workers back to work, and it put money in the people's pockets. So, I mean, all of it absolutely necessary. And then just moving forward, I like your idea of just taking your time and really watching to see what happens. The jobs report is due out a week from Friday. And of course, those numbers are not going to look good, and that's to be expected. Certainly, the media is going to jump on that because it's great negative news for this president and this administration. But at the same time, I was listening to Kevin Hassett, and he is the White House economic advisor, and he really believes that we can actually see a really good return eventually. And he doesn't think it's going to be as long as some people think. And here's why. He felt that we went into this pandemic with a very strong economy, and he believes that is going to help us to get through this and to get strong again. Would you agree with that?
I agree. The fundamentals of our economy are still the same. We had a roaring economy. I was calling it the red hot Trump economy a few months ago. But we're still where we were, I believe, about Halloween last year. So although some of the gains have been diminished, the fundamentals are still there. And I think we're going to come out of this. A lot of people are saying it's going to be a W recovery or a U-shaped recovery. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a V-shaped recovery. And what we got to really remember is that if you want to really stimulate economic growth, the best way to do it, in my opinion, is we reduce regulation and taxation, or a combo of those two. That's really how you would get this economy kicking again and take that weight off the free market and just let businesses be business and move forward. So I'd like to see more moves to continue. There's been a lot of deregulation. We need to take a look to make sure that the regulations that don't make sense are taken off the books, and only the regulations that are absolutely needed stay on the books. So that's another thing we can do to speed up the recovery.
And it's unfortunate because this president really has given us some of the best unemployment numbers, some of them historic lows. And for all factors, I mean, when you think about women, youth, African-American, Hispanic, it was so amazing. But let's talk about this for a sec, Congressman Reschenthaler. I know
No,
you're
you can call
strong.
me Guy. Come on.
But Congressman, let's talk about that for a moment. If there is anyone that can get the economy back on track, it's got to be the guy who gave us one of the best economies ever. I always say he's like Reagan on steroids.
Yes. If there's anybody that can do it, it's going to be President Trump and his administration. That's for sure. That's for sure. And another thing I like President Trump talking about is a transportation and infrastructure package. You know, if you want to talk about a possible phase four, that would be a really good phase four. We need it anyhow. And I'm not talking about just roads and bridges. That, of course, those need improvements. But in Western Pennsylvania in particular, we've got locks and dams that need improved. Some of these were built in the 20s and 30s and haven't really been maintained as well as they should have been. The Army Corps of Engineers could certainly use more funding to go to work and improve our locks and dams. And then rural broadband. If we look at how telecommuting has been important during this to keep some people working and some businesses in place where we can be, it's because of internet connectivity. So we can expand rural broadband moving forward and give some of the rural areas a chance to do the kind of work that we're doing in suburban areas and urban areas. That would be another good thing. So I would support a big T&I package as well. And President Trump is talking about it, which is very encouraging.
I just wanted to comment too that today it was Nancy Pelosi who wanted to see another $500 billion more in aid to the states. What were you all thinking when she said that today? Just give us a little insight.
We have to take a wait and see approach for sure with the states. I also want to see if some of the states want to spend the money in ways that are not related to this pandemic. Some want to plug holes in their budgets. They've had budget woes. I'm thinking about New York, California in particular. They've had budget problems for years. So they can't take that money and then use it to plug these holes in their budget, these shortfalls. It really should go to pandemic-related expenses. But we got to take a wait and see approach. I also think there's some irony because some states like Texas, for example, are reopening. So their revenue won't drop to the extent that it will. And take, for instance, our home state of Pennsylvania, where Governor Wolf has had very draconian measures, which has really hurt our economy. We are the 5th largest state in population, but we're the number 1 in unemployment claims. There's a reason for that because a lot of the businesses that shut down maybe shouldn't have been shut down. There could have been social distancing. I'm thinking about construction sites. Right. I'm thinking about online car sales that were banned.
I agree.
Banned coal mining. But if you see it, so if Pennsylvania takes a huge revenue hit because of these draconian measures, and states such as Texas don't, why are we going to reward these states that took these draconian measures? So there's a lot to think about. I'm not saying no. I'm just saying these are some of the things that need to be thought out before we pass a phase 4 stimulus.
I agree. So let's talk about you in the states and in particular Pennsylvania and your district. Let's say, first of all, thankfully, our numbers here on this side of the state, particularly your district, have not been as tragic. And any death is tragic, as you well know, but it has not been as tragic as the rest of the state. A lot of businesses, I did a story last week for American Thinker, and I interviewed the president of Consol Energy and all the way down to a dog groomer business, and all of them in between, and they are anxious to get back to work. Congressman, you and I have talked about this before. Mom and pop businesses are the backbone of this country, and what's happening is it literally is a mom and pop business. Both the husband and wife derive 100% of their income from their business, and they've been getting nothing right now. And that's something to be concerned about. So what are your thoughts on reopening Pennsylvania?
I think that we have to be very thoughtful and reopen. So yes, I think we should reopen, but do I think that we should just flip a switch and say we're reopened? No, we should be thoughtful and strategic about it. I think we should look at population density. We should look at the amount of cases, whether or not we've hit our peak. And I'm just not talking about looking at it county by county. I think we should look at it municipality by municipality. For example, where you and I both live, the northern part of our home county is more densely populated than the southern part. So even if you look at county by county, there's still disparities in population density. So, and again, a one-size-fits-all for Pennsylvania in particular doesn't make sense. If Philadelphia is really getting hit, but parts in rural Pennsylvania, such as central Pennsylvania, what we sometimes call the T, is not getting hit, then those areas should be able to reopen up. And then again, we need to look at business sector by business sector And forget restaurants, right? If restaurants open up, they can open up with provisions that it's maybe seating every other table or groups no larger than 3. There's common sense provisions we can do without just shutting down the economy in a one-size-fits-all, broad brush kind of approach. We really need nuance here, and we need strategic and thoughtful approaches.
Hey, listen, we're pretty darn creative, we Americans. I think we can figure that out. Dr. Oz even suggested perhaps some of that plexiglass between the tables. I mean, it can be very simple, and we've come up with some very creative ways for grocery shopping and other means of shopping. I think we can do that. I really do. I think we can handle it.
Well, I was just helping my dad put up plexiglass at his chiropractic office, so he put plexiglass up between the reception area, and I was there helping him. So yeah, these are common sense things that you can do. He's still been open. He's a healthcare provider, which is deemed essential, but there's those measures that you can take that can stop the contact.
Well, I'm a big fan of your mom and dad. I mean, they're great people. That's why it turned out so well, we think. But yeah, let's talk about China for a moment, if you don't mind. I had Stephen Moore, economist Stephen Moore, on with me last night on my show. And we talked about China. And interestingly enough, he's free trade all the way, right? Well, he actually thinks that there should be some reparations. He even went as far to say all those trillions of dollars that we have in debt to them, that perhaps we just don't pay all of it back. But he feels that whether it was commission or omission, they hurt this country, and it costs many, many lives.
Well, so I'm a big fan of The Economist. We actually, I saw him when he actually was speaking along with you at a Peters Township Republican.
That's right.
If memory serves me correctly. Look, there's free trade, and then there's China. I'm a big free trade guy. You've known me for a long time, Rose. I'm a big proponent of free trade. The problem is with China is we've let them into the WTO. They've acted really as a rogue nation in a lot of ways. They've not abided by WTO guidelines, and no one calls them on it. They steal our intellectual property. They flood our markets. We've been hit incredibly severely here in Western Pennsylvania because China floods us with steel and aluminum and even carbon. Talk to the folks at Calgon Carbon that's in the Pittsburgh area. China floods those markets. They also do these forced IP transfers. So if a company goes to China, they are required to transfer all the IP, and then the 51% ownership is somebody in China, which is inevitably a member of the Chinese Communist Party. And then after the Chinese figure out the operations and the systems, then lo and behold, they open up a competing business. They subsidize that business and drive our business back to the United States. These are predatory practices that China has engaged in. And because they've been doing this, they've grown their economy tenfold since they entered the World Trade Organization. I don't want to begrudge them growth, but they haven't been doing it. They haven't been doing it in a fair way that abides by the standards of the other nations in the WTO. So we've got to take a look at China's role in this virus and all their misdeeds in free trade for the last decade or so.
Do you think, is Congress planning to act on this? Or will they be sitting down and talking about what we do about China?
Yes, China is the focus of this Republican conference moving forward. I've been on numerous calls. So I'm on the House Foreign Affairs Committee and the Judiciary Committee. I'm also on the Elected Leadership Committee. So in all those meetings, we've had talks about China, more so when it comes to foreign affairs, of course. But yeah, China needs to be held accountable for this. We also have to make sure we look at how China coordinated with the World Health Organization to cover up this pandemic. I have a resolution that I've introduced that says that we should not fund the World Health Organization until two things happen. One, the Director General, Tedros, he's got to resign. We cannot tolerate him leading this organization. And we can talk about Dr. Tedros if you want. The other thing is we need to have an investigation by an international panel to investigate how the World Health Organization either was grossly negligent in this Wuhan virus, or how they helped cover up, or at worst, how they helped China cover up the spread of this virus. And just a point on that, China knew they mapped this genome on something like January 3rd. So they knew that this spread person to person. Taiwan on December, I believe it was December 31st. It was definitely in 2019, late 2019. told the World Health Organization that this virus spread person to person. Despite that, China refused to acknowledge that, said it was a zoonotic disease that only transferred from animal to people. They did not lock down Wuhan right away. This virus spread all over China because it was the Chinese New Year and everybody was traveling home. And then from there, of course, it transferred around the world. Had China just locked down and done the responsible thing, they could have stopped 95% of this virus. And that's from a university. I cannot remember the name of the university, but it's a university in Great Britain that quoted that has the study I'm quoting from. And I can get you the information. But 95% could have been contained. Also, the Chinese did not allow American scientists and American doctors in when we said we would come in and help. Despite this, the World Health Organization parroted the Chinese Communist Party talking points, and they applauded China on their transparency when we know China was not transparent at all. And it took them, they wouldn't even call this a pandemic until, I believe, mid-March. So because China and the World Health Organization botched this, it caused probably over hundreds of thousands of deaths around the world, this economic devastation. They should really be held accountable for this.
I agree. And it's ironic because this definitely needs investigated. You'll need to continue to look into it. At the same time, you've got Nancy Pelosi, who's putting together an Oversight Committee to look into impeachment 2.0 to see whether or not everything's been handled well by this administration where the pandemic is concerned. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, can I hit on that for a second? This special committee, this Oversight Committee, is an absolute farce. You know, I don't know if people know this, but we actually have a committee in the House of Representatives called the Oversight Committee. That's what it's there to do. That's the job of the Oversight Committee. So Nancy Pelosi has wasted over $2 million because we've now appropriated $2 million for this special committee. She wants to put Clyburn, who's the majority whip, in charge. Representative Clyburn is one of the ones that suggested that we need to use this pandemic to radically shift government and the role of government in the United States. So they're going to use this as a way to come up with all these suggestions. They'll probably have a bunch of far left, liberal, progressive ideas that can be found in the Green New Deal. Cap and trade, tax credits for wind and solar energy, 100% mail-in ballots, same-day voter registration, right? Their dream sheet that they couldn't get passed, they'll cram that in the suggestions, and they'll turn around and blame everything on Trump with this Oversight Committee. But again, completely unnecessary. This is a media stunt, and it's a way for Nancy Pelosi to let Whip Clyburn make an attempt to get the Green New Deal passed in a backdoor fashion.
Exactly. Well, I got to ask you on a personal level. Here you are, your first term, and all of these things have happened. I mean, did you ever in a million years think that you would be serving this country during a pandemic, during an impeachment process? I mean, the list goes on. It's astounding, isn't it? And how do you feel about that? Has to be.
It's been nonstop and an absolute whirlwind. I came into Congress at what was the longest government shutdown in history. So that's what I came down to, a government shutdown. Then, of course, we had impeachment, which was we can talk about that, but that was wild, especially being on the Judiciary Committee. This pandemic, and let's not forget about the killing of Soleimani and all the strikes and all the tension with Iran. Yes. So being on the Foreign Affairs Committee, that's been incredible. So yeah, it's been a whirlwind. I wouldn't want it any other way. And I'm really glad I'm in Congress because I believe that my skill sets that I had before really lend itself to this new position, and also with the challenges we're facing with this new position.
You bring a lot to the table, Congressman. You really do.
Thanks, Rose.
If we were to close this, I know we're running out of time. If we were to close this conversation right now and you had one message for the people in your district, and I actually look at you as the state's congressman, the country's congressman. I really do, because you're doing such great work. But if you had a message for the 14th district, what would that be right now?
Well, I think it's that the American dream is too big to be killed by a virus. We're going to get through this. We went through World War I, World War II. We had the Spanish flu, the Spanish influenza that we overcame. We overcame the Great Depression. We are going to get through this. So to think otherwise is just falling. The economy is going to come back stronger than ever. The American system is going to come back stronger than ever. We've just got to fall back onto our principles, fall back onto what we stand for. We're going to weather this storm. And again, America is going to be stronger than ever when we get through this pandemic.
I agree. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Rose.
Keep up the good work. We're glad to have you representing us.